Happy Monday. Hello to everyone in Facebook. Jackie Broman here from TBA Law. Hope everyone had a very safe and happy Easter now, a week ago. It's obviously safer generally than other Easters when the road toll usually goes through the roof, but most of us stayed home as we're supposed to at the moment. And today I wanted to talk about human rights. So 2 weeks ago I talked about how laws were made, and I sort of did it in the context of the COVID-19 issues that we've got at the moment, and human rights are sort of playing into this as well. With the media all focusing more and more on stories locally and COVID stories, I am worried that there are countries that will use the fact that people aren't watching them at the moment to commit some atrocities, or how they enforce their population to avoid or lockdown, and potentially whether COVID-19 is also used as a weapon against various parts of the community. So it will be interesting to see what comes out in the world as the media starts settling back into less of the primary issues and the scare and the fear of the immediate issues resolve, and we start hearing stories about what happens in other countries. So, human rights then. A lot of us watch a lot of content put out from the United States, and the United States Constitution has a Bill of Rights. The Australian Constitution does not. When the Australian Constitution was formed, they didn't consider that a Bill of Human Rights was needed in it. A lot of the fundamentals of human rights sit behind how our justice system works. And without a Bill of Rights, there are risks that rights might be set aside in certain times, or with certain influences on the judiciary. There would have to be a huge change in the culture in Australia for that to happen. So where do our human rights sit as Australians? So primarily they sit in international charters. They sit with the UN, having created a whole lot of international law around what human rights are. The other thing that Australia has is the Human Rights Commission. So the Human Rights Commission is responsible for looking after the legislation around racism, discrimination, sexism and ageism. So those four main pieces of legislation. So we have legislated in those areas in terms of the rights of minorities, and so the Human Rights Commission is where you go to make a complaint if any of those four things are breached. Now, in Victoria, we do actually have a Charter of Human Rights, and at the time it was created, I think it was 2008, we were the only state to have one. The ACT as a territory had a Charter of Human Rights as well, and in fact I'm not sure that any other state has one. I think potentially Victoria is the only state that actually has legislated broad human rights. So why is this relevant? Well, it's relevant in terms of the quick law changes and restrictions that are coming in at the moment. The Charter of Human Rights in Victoria is a piece of legislation which is like a lens through which all laws need to be looked at. So in terms of when new legislation is presented to Parliament, they have to do a compliance check against the Charter of Human Rights, and similarly, executive and administrative law processes need to be put through the Charter of Human Rights as well. And to some degree, the judiciary needs to keep it in mind as well in terms of making decisions. So I had to grab out a textbook actually for this morning, because the Charter of Human Rights for Victoria covers a whole lot of extra stuff. So it covers the freedom from being forced to work, so slavery, the freedom of movement, freedom of thought, conscious and religious beliefs, freedom of expression, freedom of association and peaceful assembly, freedom of recognition and equality, freedom of right to life, a right to protection from torture and inhuman or degrading treatment, a right to privacy, a right to protection of families and children, a right to take part in public life and to vote, a right to cultural rights, a right to property rights, a right to liberty, a right to humane treatment, a right and certain rights for children in the criminal process, rights to fair hearing, rights to actually have a criminal proceeding, right not to be tried and punished more than once for the same thing. So all of these things, when you list them out like that, are very important in terms of what we believe our rights are. And yet the Victorian Charter is the only piece of legislation that actually protects all of that in Victoria for us, and there is no Commonwealth equivalent. So looking through the lens of some of these things, at the moment, our right to freedom of movement is being curtailed to some degree, and there ultimately will be some review of some of the fines, I believe, that are being handed out for people going and doing things that they believe are necessary. And we've also got other rights here that I suppose where one right outweighs the other, there has to be some weighing of those things. But ultimately, if the weighting given is not what we believe to be in the best interests of human rights, then some of these administrative things can be wound backwards. So there you go, a whole lot of heavy stuff really for a Monday morning. But I think the time and the context is right to have a look at human rights. And it's funny because I actually set out all my topics for my Facebook Lives in November of last year, and it just so happened that, 2 weeks ago I was talking about how laws were made, and now I'm talking about human rights right in the middle of a pandemic and a lockdown. So I suppose just bear those things in mind and keep looking after each other is all that we can do at the moment. I don't think we should be wishing all this stuff to end prematurely. I think we need to consider the vulnerable people in the community and make sure that we get things right with this. And on the flip side, also trying to balance an economy that doesn't completely fail. So I think at the moment the balance is about right, and over the next month or so changes will happen again. So look, I hope that everyone is staying sane in this time. And look, I'm going to still be doing this every Monday, so watch out for me Monday at 10 o'clock next week. And we are available by phone and email if you need to ask a question, or you can direct message us on Facebook. We are still working. A lot of us are working from home. We are still seeing people. The Law Institute of Victoria has confirmed with the Attorney General in Victoria that legal services are essential services. Particularly, there are contracts on foot, people have mortgages, people have insurances, people are still, getting unwell, needing their affairs in order and all those sorts of things. So that confirmation has also come through. So we're still here for you if you need. Otherwise, take care and I'll see you next week.